National tension is on full display right now as the FBI warns of plans for armed protests in all 50 state capitals and D.C. this weekend. And the U.S. House of Representatives pushes ahead to impeach President Donald Trump for the second time, following last week's deadly Capitol Hill riot.
My friends, we are in a very difficult place in our country as long as Donald Trump still sits in the White House.
The U.S. House pressed swiftly this week towards impeachment to remove Trump from office for what Democrats and some Republicans claim is incitement of insurrection. The House began debating the impeachment resolution on Wednesday, exactly 1 week before Democrat Joe Biden is set to be inaugurated. Biden will become the second Catholic U.S. president, but Biden has promised a pro-abortion agenda, what some are calling the most extreme yet, and that directly contradicts the Catholic Church's teachings on life. Biden's presidency will also be joined by a Democratic majority in the House and Senate after Republican incumbents Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue lost their seats in last week's Georgia runoff races. Dan Lipinski, up until this month, was a U.S. representative for the state of Illinois and a Catholic pro-life Democrat, one at that. He joins us now via Skype. Congressman, welcome back. You served in Congress for 16 years, 8 terms, and just days after you ended your term and left, our U.S. Capitol was stormed by rioters. First, what's your reaction to the events we saw last week?
Well, it was disturbing. It was incredibly troubling that the U.S. Capitol, which is both the symbol of our republic, but also really the linchpin of our republic, to see an attack like that was just terrible. Something that I thought that I would never see, and what this means for our country going forward. It means we have a lot of work to do to bring our nation back together, and it's going to be a tough job to do.
A lot of pro-lifers are feeling defeated that Democrats will maintain control of the White House, the House, and now the U.S. Senate. You have the perspective of being a pro-life Democrat. What's your take on the state of pro-life efforts during this term? Do you have some hope that any pro-life progress can be made?
Well, I think over the next 2 years at least, it's going to have to be playing defense in Congress. I'm hopeful that because the majorities in the House and Senate are so narrow for Democrats, I'm hopeful that we will not see major policy changes, such as getting rid of the Hyde Amendment so that no taxpayer funds go to abortion. But that's something that we all have to be on top of and be working on right now to make sure legislators who we believe are probably on the borderline on this issue, hear from pro-life Americans that we do not want taxpayer funding of abortion. But there are going to be executive orders that President Biden is very likely very early on to put forward, to institute, that are going to reverse a lot of the pro-life orders that President Trump had done. And that's going to be a matter of, questions going to be, are the bishops going to come out and say anything about President Biden being Catholic, making these executive orders?
Do you think pro-lifers can depend on Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia to be a pro-life vote in the Senate? He is a Democrat.
I'm very hopeful that we can count on him to be a pro-life vote. Joe Manchin is going to have a lot of power in the Senate right now as the a very moderate Democrat, but he's going to have to hear from his constituents about how important it is that he maintain a pro-life stand.
President-elect Joe Biden is, like you, a Democrat and Catholic, but unlike you, is pro-abortion. What's your message to President-elect Biden and to any Catholics who serve in his administration when it comes to protecting the sanctity of life?
Well, look, I have been a strong life. I was for 16 years a defender of life in the U.S. Congress. And it is sad to see that we have Catholics who will not defend life. President Biden, in many ways, I've said, is the best Democrat I could see when it comes to trying to bring people together in this nation and work together. And I would just urge President Biden not to take a radical pro-choice stand as President of the United States. That's not going to bring our nation together. I think we all need to pray. I know we need to pray for President Biden and all Catholics in his administration that they decide to stand up for life. And that's what we need to do.
We just have a minute left, but what is your message to your former colleagues in Congress right now?
Well, I think they really need to, they know how difficult the situation is. And I'm talking to them, and the tension there is really terrible. And they need to lead the way. They need to be leaders in bringing our nation back together. I'm hopeful that they will step up and do that, but it's also up to all of us to not get embroiled in these battles and understand that we need to stand together, stand up for democracy, and come together as Americans. And we all play a part in that.
Absolutely. Dan Lipinski, thank you so much for your time this week. Thank you.
Thank you.
For continued pro-life analysis, we're joined now in studio by Mallory Quigley, the Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony list. Mallory, thanks for being here. Now that the dust has settled from last week's Georgia runoff results, what is the Susan B. Anthony list take on why Perdue and Loeffler lost? Is the pro-life issue losing its ability to drive out voters in Georgia?
It's a fair question, Catherine, and I think what's important to remember is that we're not having these pro-life conversations in a vacuum. Our nation is dealing with so many other questions, and there was record high turnout, far surpassing the historical norms on both sides in Republican and Democrat districts. And we know from our data on the ground, I know you talked to Michelle and Mrs. Musgrave last week, that we saw that the life issue does still move voters. We have plenty of data from this election cycle that supports that, and there was just incredible turnout.
Mallory, as we were just discussing, the anxiety and division in our nation is palpable. It feels like a historically tense time.
Yeah.
Mallory, what are your thoughts on how we can sound the alarm with genuine pro-life concerns that there are right now, but without feeding into the anxiety and division and without vilifying those who disagree with us?
Yes, I think what's so important to remember is that this dehumanization of people that we disagree with on a political and policy level cannot extend so far that we cannot resort to dehumanization. As pro-lifers, this is what we're fighting against with regards to the unborn, that we deny humanity of these children because we can't see them, because they're not like us, and we can't do that to our opponents. I found myself so often turning to invoking St. Michael and the Blessed Mother since the beginning of the year. We cannot give up our Christian hope. You know, we're called to persevere and to keep speaking the truth in love and pointing out the good. And we cannot achieve victory without that humanity and recognizing the humanity of all people.
Absolutely. Mallory, with Democrats now controlling the White House, the House, and the Senate, does this mean the pro-life movement will be concentrating on state-by-state strategy instead? What does that landscape look like?
Well, of course, there's very exciting things that are ongoing in the states, but as Congressman Lipinski said, you know, for the next 2 years, we're going to be playing defense, and that's a battle we cannot abandon. And a lot will depend on Senator Manchin, who, of course, represents a very strongly pro-life state, who knows the movement, and who has pledged to prevent things like destruction of the filibuster, which could lead to expansion of the court. So we're hopeful that he will stay in that lane where he's pledged to be. And And absolutely, we've got to also, at the same time, while working here in DC, pivot back to the states where there's incredible momentum continuing from state legislators, ultimately hoping to pass legislation that is upheld by the Supreme Court and is reflective of the values of the people in that state. In Florida, just this week, we announced intentions to pass the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. That would be a huge win in Florida, which is a state, despite its pro-life views, actually does have a large number of abortions occurring post 20 weeks.
Yes, well, thank you so much for sharing those words of hope and that reminder that we need to be praying right now. I know we'll have many conversations in the weeks to come. Mallory Quigley with the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thanks.